in Michigan's favorite Washtenaw County.
Here we go.
Welcome to the Entheo Show, where we discuss entheogenic plants, fungi, and decriminalizing the state of Michigan and beyond. I'm Jim Salame. Now welcome the hosts, Michael File and Colin McDougall.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Entheo Show. This is our fourth episode. Today's guests are decriminalized. Yeah, we're live. I see it.
Yeah.
No, I said we were in episode 4.
I can't hear you. Kind of.
Time is flying.
Time
I
is.
just said we were on episode 4 of it.
Yeah, I know. Pretty amazing. So today's guests are Decriminalized Nature Massachusetts and a group called Bay Staters who helped them push the resolutions forward in Somerset, Massachusetts, and also Cambridge, Massachusetts. So we're going to look at a different state today, which is breath of fresh air. See how they did it in their state, and they already have 2 cities. So there's no reason why any other Michigan city shouldn't have too much of a problem getting going after this show, and just seeing how another group made it out of nowhere. So I really look forward to talking with them. Our last show we cut
$500 to any city that can, or to any person that can put together a campaign and pass before Hazel Park.
Yeah, and we got speaking of Hazel Park, we just met with some people, someone from Hazel Park who's looking to get a resolution going there, which is in Oakland County, Michigan. Hopefully, sounds like some promise, and that they're already speaking with the council people about getting a decrimination resolution passed. So I'm really looking forward to seeing them, and hopefully we'll have them on the show around the first week of April too.
Oakland County, Colin, has a real progressive prosecuting attorney, just like our beloved Washtenaw County.
Yeah, her name's Karen McDonald. I can't remember who she beat, but she defeated an incumbent prosecutor who just wasn't like a very good prosecutor for the people. I know that she was a Democrat, but she was kind of lame on a lot of policies, and a lot of them were outdated. And Karen McDonald, she stepped down from being I think an Oakland County circuit judge, some sort of judge out in Oakland County, to become a prosecutor, or to run against her, and which is really cool. And I think that she's like part of the Progressive Prosecutors Association along with Ellie Savat. So and hopefully she can back us up there. But yeah, last week's episode we had our friends from the University of Michigan, SAPS, on our program, Student Association for Psychedelic Studies, Nick Glinos and Moss Herberholtz. But also we had our friend Caden Reed from Decriminalized Nature Marquette, and we got an update. Yeah, first city up in the UP to like get a resolution going there. My favorite. We're looking at you, Sault Ste. Marie.
Yeah, and Houghton.
But yeah, so real exciting times we're living in. And also, hopefully we get to hear from Julie at some point during the show. Tomorrow, the Michigan Psychedelic Society is having an event at 6:30 p.m. on Zoom. It's Thank You Plant Medicine Day tomorrow, and so we're having it's like a talk, like a share your own experience of how plant medicine has impacted you in your life, and how it's healed you, and why that's important. Last year, our DNA2 group, we had a fundraiser, and it was our biggest fundraiser that we had for our resolution, and it was on Thank You Plant Medicine Day. So I'm sure I'm going to get a bunch of Facebook memories coming up in like next day or so to remind me of all the good times. This is right before COVID hit too, so like one of the last big times I was with a bunch of people.
Yeah, I missed that. I was looking forward to that, but that was right after I went to jail.
Yeah.
Good time. But we have lots of news. Things happening all over the country.
Yeah.
Want to fill us in, Jim?
I do. It's the Entheo News on February 19th, 2021. In New Jersey, the possession of 1 ounce or less of psilocybin mushrooms has been downgraded from a third-degree crime to a disorderly persons offense. This classification lessens the penalty to a $1,000 fine or a 6-month sentence rather than the steeper drug penalties they've had, which is 3 to 5 years in prison. President Biden quietly announced harm reduction among drug policy priorities, enhancing evidence-based harm reduction efforts and confronting racial equity issues related to drug policy among its 5 key policy priorities to address substance abuse disorder in America. Also, a drug decriminalization and treatment bill in Washington state cleared its first legislative hurdle on Monday. The House Public Safety Committee voted 7-6 to approve the Pathways to Recovery Act, House Bill 1499, which would remove penalties for personal use amounts of legal substances and expand outreach and recovery services. Now, this vote is the first time a panel of lawmakers in the U.S. and any state has voted to remove criminal penalties for possession of all drugs. The bill would drastically expand outreach and recovery services, part of what supporters have called a holistic continuum of care. I like that. To support people with drug use disorders. Also, Republican Iowa lawmakers recently filed a bill that would allow seriously ill people to use psilocybin mushrooms, MDMA, LSD, DMT, or peyote as alternative treatments after they've exhausted traditional legal medicines, which obviously that can be improved. Vermont House Representative Brian Chena introduced a bill yesterday to decriminalize entheogenic plants and fungi that are commonly used for medicinal, spiritual, religious, and entheogenic purposes. And also, California could be on the verge of becoming the latest state to decriminalize psychedelics for personal and therapeutic use, building on a growing movement across the country, as I've been discussing just now, to rethink the so-called war on drugs. The bill introduced Thursday by State Senator Scott Weiner, a Democrat who represents San Francisco, would decriminalize substances such as psilocybin, MDMA, LSD, ketamine, DMT, and mescaline, but it does not include peyote. And that's all for this segment of the Entheo News. Back to you, Mike and Colin.
I'm trying to pull it up right now, but did you see the SB 738 in Hawaii that could set up treatment centers for therapeutic administration of psilocybin mushrooms in Hawaii?
That's fantastic.
There's a couple other states that we mentioned last time that have bills going on in their house. I think we talked about Florida and Texas, so that's really cool that so many places around the country are actually talking about it. But let's hope that
that's the signal to everybody. It's time to join your local campaign and get involved. We need volunteers. I'm sure all these other campaigns need volunteers. Come help us out. Get a hold of us.
Yeah, and whether you're in Michigan or another city anywhere across the country, there's always the Decriminalized Nature Handbook. You can check that out and just kind of get a group going in your area. Some of these bills, they don't really cover what the decriminalized nature resolutions really are set out to do. And so the best way is just actively get engaged at your local level and go from there. So
I think the email for the National Decrim organization isn't it decrimnature@gmail.com?
I think so. I think it's that simple. You can always reach out to us too. I know I've talked with someone from Texas this week, and I know Julie is on a.
Connect you with any state. If we can't, Julie can.
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
Julie.
think she's gonna be on today though.
Okay, I know she has like she's going to be in like a meeting with Decriminalized Nature Montana tonight, I believe at 8:30 too. It's with also Carlos and Larry, I think, are on that meeting as well. So check out Decriminalized Nature Montana.
That'll be a fun one.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got every week we've got a plant of the week, throwing you a little twist. It's not a plant. It's not a fungi. We're talking about Bufo alvarius today, the Sonoran desert toad. Best known for its containing 5-MeO-DMT, as well as bufotenin. All of us here, I think I'm free to say, have our own experiences with it. So I'd like to hear, do a little roundtable here and, hear everybody's thoughts on toad.
Sure.
Sure.
I'm happy to start. I experienced the toad last year, and it was one of the most profound experiences I've ever had. It's a lot more intense than ayahuasca, and it's shorter in duration than any psychedelic I've ever had before. I mean, it lasted about 45 minutes. And as far as when they use the phrase dissolving your ego, that's exactly what happened. It just dissolved my entire being into the universe, so to speak. And these things are so affable to try to describe. And it's all I can say is I definitely know that it was so intense that it's something that I don't think I could do again so quickly. I definitely needed to have somebody there with me to help me with the process because it's not something I could have done on my own. I was already on a dieta for an upcoming ceremony with ayahuasca. So I was prepared, but definitely you would want to be prepared for something like this with your diet, even for, a week before you try it, to set your intention and to prepare your body from, not having a lot of toxins, whether it be alcohol or cannabis or any other psychedelic substances. That's what I got.
Yeah, mine similar. I gotta echo. Ego dissolving is like one of the things that sticks out to me. I was I was lucky enough to take a part in a ceremony with it a couple of years ago, and definitely probably the most like powerful experience. I'd say like religious or spiritual experiences, like how I would describe it, especially coming out of it. There's something about it, like when you come out of it, it like puts you in like a zone where you were you were there when you were like a child or like a infant. Like there's just like this joy of like realizing that you are alive like after going through it and that you're lucky enough to be a part of it and just the whole experience. And but I would just recommend like a lot of doing it with um, a guide who has experience doing it before, and um, it's not something that like I would have like probably like even like went out looking for. Really, it kind of found me. I feel like
Me too.
and you know after after it though, I researched more, and I do know that like those toads in the Sonoran Desert are like being um, like over harvested because of like their secrets out. So there is definitely like something about it where I know I did it one time. I don't really feel like I'd need to do it again. Not to say that I won't ever like do it again, but I just I'm a little bit more cautious once I found out a lot more about what's going on with those toads. So yeah.
My
No,
understanding of
I think that's uh, in Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, the newest season. He goes through synthesis of 5-MeO-DMT in a lab, talking about the dangers and plight of the toad, and why a easy bulk synthesis that anybody can do at home is really important. Um, for the future of 5-MeO-DMT, for the sustainability of 5-MeO-DMT. So that's really exciting. We have some guests starting to roll in. That's really exciting. Brendan O'Connor joining us. We'll have a few more on soon.
I just wanted to add to that conversation real quick that the bufo toad is not something that's been around for millennia, like ayahuasca or Cambo or some of these other plant medicines. It's something that's rather new in the last like 4 or 5 decades. I think
Yes.
in the '60s it came about, and somebody just discovered that it had this potency, and now that people are using it for that experience.
Yeah, in that
Now,
recent Hamilton's episode, they really go into like the guy who kind of figured it all out. I think it was actually the '80s is when he like wrote there's like a little guide to it. So
That's right.
what were you gonna say, Mike?
and then I was just going to say, does anybody know about Yopo use? Because talking about 5-MeO, plant-based source, such as a seed which is produced every year from a tree, may be more sustainable, but I've also heard arguments that it may not be. So I was just wondering if anybody had any history on use of Yopo, whether it went back further or whether toads really the beginning of 5 and then we find Yopo, or
I think that Yopo was found before the toad, if I'm not mistaken.
maybe that's one of our upcoming plants of the week.
Yeah, I know somebody who has some experience with it too, and with also the toad. Maybe I can try and get them on. They're involved with the Psychedelic Society, so I don't want to oust them right now. But
I'd
yeah,
love to talk to him because I've done the Yopo snuff once when I was like 22, 23. Never came across it again. And then this Bufo experience. And like you both said, very ego dissolving. I saw every living existence and every moment in time like flash before my life or before my eyes in the 2 seconds of the first inhale. And before I was even to that third second, that already whooshed past me into this bright white light that I was just bathing in. And there's about a 10-minute, I call it whiteout, because it's definitely not a blackout where like just lost fragment of time. I remember experiencing eternity upon eternity in this white light. Realistically, when you watch the video, because I did record it, I mean, it's 10 minutes of me in this whiteout phase. When I came out, I understood the music that was going on in a different way. My space holder had been singing some Macaros while I was out. And I just everything about life had more meaning instantaneously, more depth, and the things I was doing, they either had purpose or they were ready to be let go. And so it was a very positive experience. But I'm very excited. We have a couple guests on. I do believe we're expecting one more. But Colin, if you want to go ahead and get them introduced,
yeah,
we'll do the book at the end today, I think, to change things up.
yeah. So today we have Brendan O'Connor. He's from Decriminalized Nature, Massachusetts, and then we also have Serena Gordon. I'm sorry, Serena. And she's from the Bay Staters. We're also expecting a James Davis from the Bay Staters group. He's going to be on here with us. But welcome to the Entheo Show, you two.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Hello.
Welcome.
Yes.
Have you both on and hear about all the progress you've been making on that side of this country. I know this all started West Coast. We kind of popped up real quick in the Midwest, but East Coast coming back strong and saying, Massachusetts, 2 states in a matter of weeks, mid-COVID. That's really impressive. So, I mean, hats off to you. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we, it all started here, and we're taking back the title, At Harvard and a lot of the psychedelic projects back in the 60s. I mean, this is the OG stomping grounds of psychedelics. And we lost our way for a while, and now we're taking it back. So I think that it's really exciting to see some of this progress being made. And the good news is that, and I think this is the case in a lot of states, the public representatives were ready, just no one was asking. And now we're asking. So there's so much less priming the pump than I thought we had to do. It's really just showing that you care and getting it done.
I think
So-
that the testimonies, having people share their stories, I think that really helped make it a personal experience to these representatives rather than just having a bill in their hands. They actually have stories of people and how these substances have actually helped. I think that was a huge, and especially the format in Bay Staters, how they have that action hour where just testimony after testimony after testimony just keeps getting cranked out. It's really been snowballing.
Yeah. So can you give me like a timeline? Like, when did you guys first begin, like as a group, or like was there a group that like existed before like the decriminalized nature movement, or how did it get going?
Yeah, great question. So, about a year ago, a group of us met in a small apartment in the north end of Boston, and we didn't have a group yet. It was just, people that were concerned with these issues and wanted to do something about it. So I'd say that that's really where it all started. It came together forming Decriminalized Nature Cambridge, and that ended up becoming Decriminalized Nature Massachusetts. And so we had been chipping away at Cambridge for quite some time. And I feel like we did we made a very common mistake at Decrim Nature Mass of overthinking things and having too much, kind of nonprofit bureaucracy versus actually getting things done. And then Bay Staters came into the picture and really taught us a good lesson there. I think that right from the start, Bay Staters was, to Serena's point, driving these action hours. That was, hey, we don't have a nonprofit, we don't have anything. Let's just get people to call up reps. Let's just email people. And we adapted that and started tag teaming roughly in July is where things really started to take off. And from there, we just focused on action. And Somerville came into the picture and got jealous that their neighbors were much further along with this than they were, and said, "Hey, why are you working with them? You should work with us." And we said we'd be happy to. And Bay Staters and Decrim Nature Mass came together and flipped them both within a relatively short amount of time. So what would you add to that, Serena? I mean, that's the high level overview from my perspective.
I was entirely shocked. I guess that I'm a little bit late to the game here. Like I had just started and realizing just how far along and how quickly this happened. All of a sudden, Somerville, and then within a matter of weeks, Cambridge. I was floored. I've actually been working over in New York too with some groups over there. So then seeing stuff so close to home, I was just absolutely astounded and knew I had to be a part of it. It was inspiring.
Cool. So do you guys both like live in either of those cities, Cambridge or Somerville, or do you like live in the Boston area? And these are like Boston suburbs, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, so Somerville and Cambridge are kind of like part of Boston proper, I guess. Like, it has, that area, and then there's all these other little areas that are still considered Boston. I mean, like, I live over in kind of one of those little burb areas that has its own name, but is generally still Boston.
Right. Like
Boston
I'm from,
is lovely and confusing like that.
yeah, no, I'm from Dearborn, which is like a part of Greater Detroit. So, it's like the same thing. Like Detroit's like big city, and everybody else calls themselves Detroit, but they got their own name. But is Somerville like a college town, or is just Cambridge?
Cambridge is the town that is like the college town, and then it kind of overflows into Somerville, where you kind of have a lot of the student population living.
Okay. Cool. Well, that makes a lot more sense now. I heard that I was reading when first like the Somerville was passed, and like Somerville, it reminded me of like Ann Arbor. Like I saw pictures of it, and like it just seemed like it was like a lot of like a walkable city. It's kind of like cool, like vibes to it, I guess you could say. And it won like a similar award to Ann Arbor, where it's like one of those #1 cities, like small towns in the U.S. or something like that. So that was pretty cool. So can you talk to us a little bit more about your Entheo hour, or like the Entheo action hour, or with Bay Staters?
So when everybody signs on, we do brief introductions and kind of get to know each other a little bit. And that helps us kind of highlight the story that when we click on the templates, then there's the letter that's already written out, amazing verbiage, and we just kind of add our testimony right to the beginning of it, and it gets sent. And it's just action. So I mean, we're all sitting there doing this, and before we sign off, and so it's not like it doesn't become part of like, okay, it'll get done later. It's we're doing it right then and there. That's the whole point.
Where are you sending? Where are you sending those testimonials?
Over to the representatives, and so every like the representatives and the senators, it's all kind of like already laid out, which makes it also very easy. James does a huge amount of work in looking at the people that we're having there that day and making sure that the letters go where they need to. James gets all the credit there. He puts in so much work to get this put together. I know also over in New York, we're kind of facing the same thing with they make it very difficult to try and figure out, the district and what towns are in the district. And they don't really make that information as easy to analyze as I would like to see in an Excel sheet. But there are, you can go onto the site and type in your town, and it will tell you your representative right there. And so that, makes the step with like knowing exactly where it's getting sent, and all their contact information is available nationally if you go onto the government website. And so then finding out who your representative is, and each representative does cover multiple towns, but when you type in your zip code into the finder, it makes it very easy to locate.
Yeah, and I think the concept of these action hours that I would encourage anyone who's listening that is thinking about getting this done in their own city or state is as follows, right? The whole process to get this done is simple. I overthought it for months, and it boils down to the following. So you find out who is your representatives, and that could be, if you're doing it on a city, just the city council. Email all of them. It doesn't matter if you live on the specific neighborhood that they represent. And maybe get together a couple of your friends and do this too. But you're just finding out what their email address is, and you're writing a brief email stating the reason why you're passionate about this, and then maybe linking to some recent articles that highlight the evidence and the scientific studies around how it can be effective for, anxiety, depression, PTSD, what have you. And then just request a meeting with them to talk about it. And then when they don't respond, 2 days later, you follow up again and you say, hey, I'm just following up on this, really interested in meeting. And at that point, you'd be surprised about how many responses you get. They'll probably...
too. I think we can actually book a time. If you go on to, you can book to speak at these town hall meetings when they have their minutes. They have like X amount of time that is dedicated towards speakers. And so you can actually apply to go speak to them directly, where they have no choice but to listen to you for your allotted time. And it can be really powerful to go and speak, and then also have people there to support you that, are feeling the same way. That was a lesson learned from somebody down in Texas that has done this and has a legal entheogenic church.
Yeah, so it'll typically then be, a 20 to 30 minute meeting where you're just introducing yourself and then talking again, sharing your personal story, and then just ask them, how can we get this done here? And they'll tell you. They'll say, oh, well, this representative, maybe won't be as favorable. Talk to this one. Oh, you might want to reach out to this other nonprofit group. They're very helpful, even if they're not going to be a sponsor of it. And just follow the next steps from there. Rinse and repeat. That's really all it takes.
Yeah.
I think it's powerful to be able to have a presence and to know that, especially in Massachusetts, I know it's relatively easy. In New York, it doesn't quite operate with the same ease in being able to just go and speak. And of course, with COVID-19 happening, it makes it a lot harder to have presence. But it is still something. We all have a right to be heard, and so that's kind of where these letters come in as well. Having that right to be heard and being heard, having a voice. I think we all feel a little bit dejected that in our government, we don't have a voice. Everything just kind of happens. But when we collectively get together to take action and have a voice, that collective voice is a lot more powerful.
Yeah.
So when you guys do email drives during these action hours, I know you had talked about sharing your story being a really powerful piece of what you're doing. I know when we were sending things out, it wasn't necessarily an action hour. It was maybe a weekend where we tried to send as many letters or emails as we could, but we used an automated system. We used phone to action. So everybody was definitely, as soon as they put in their address, they were emailing the right representative. It was pre-scripted for them. And then there's room at the end of the phone script, if they chose that, to, add their story. But we didn't do a story-based piece. I want to know, A, did you guys use any digital tools like that, or are you looking at doing that as you grow? And B, how has the implementing the use of story helped you guys?
From a tool perspective, we use Action Network to track the volunteers and have an input for them to join and request information. But we haven't done much in the sense of automated outreach. I think there's a lot of potential for us to grow there. But I would caution against people thinking that they have to figure that out before they start taking action. I was guilty of that myself. I'm an ops guy for work. I do like tech stacks and So I nerd out over that stuff. I love it. And I'll spend 6 hours on that and nothing doing the actual action. So, don't be afraid to do things that can't scale, right? Just take action. That's the most important. And then to your point, absolutely, there's some really powerful tools out there that you can start to take advantage of and upscale from there.
I also think the personal aspect, like adding your story, it helps them understand that this isn't just, like another email, another piece of paper to click by. This is like someone actually took the time to sit and share their story. And I mean, you'd be surprised how entheogens have affected so many lives, and there are so many people that could benefit from them when used safely. And there's a lot of things that need to happen right now. People aren't happy. Like life, everybody seems kind of miserable, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so when you add your individual story, it also, rather than a mass email, like it gives it that personal touch that, it means enough to you that you'll take that little bit of time extra out of your day to, add that to it, rather than just these bulk pre-processed emails that, are easy to click through because it's an email. You go and you get yep. But like when you see a story that kind of catches your attention, you're a lot more likely to listen and kind of read through it and spend some time, because I'm sure they get tons of emails and they have to go through every single one of them. But I mean, eventually, like, one will catch their attention.
What is the name of that program that you guys use again?
The Action Network.
Action Network. Okay.
Yeah. Almost like a CRM for your volunteer base.
Cool.
That's great. I had a quick question. Well, first, I just wanted to say, to comment, I mean, kudos to you guys. I mean, we are the voices that are being heard, but we're also speaking for people whose voices can't be heard. And I think it's important that we realize that we are doing that for a number of people that just don't have that voice or that platform, I guess. How did, and if you want to start, Brennan, that'd be great. How did you find yourself in this movement?
It's a great question. So it was probably a couple years ago where I started to think through, how can I make a real impact on something, on a cause that's not getting enough attention, right? So I subscribe to the effective altruism kind of approach to this, where you look at, okay, so climate change is an important issue, for example, but tons of people are working on it, and there's tons of resources being thrown at it. So one incremental person there, you're not going to have as big of an impact as you would on another issue that didn't have enough support already behind it. So from that perspective, I know that's a little analytical, but I think it's like, mathematically, like, working in this space is like one of the highest impact things you can do. If you're, I like using this analogy where, as cool as like AirPods are, right? Does someone who's struggling from crippling depression and anxiety really care about the newest release of AirPods? No. So therefore, that's not the most important problem to work on. It seems like creating happiness and creating a better human experience is. So I just couldn't think of, a better way to spend my time and a more important impact. And Jim, you made a really good point there, that there's plenty of people that don't have a voice. And I think included in those are people that aren't aware of these tools, but struggle from depression, anxiety, PTSD, and are stuck in the traditional Western medicine approach of, take a pill and go away. And it's up to us to get this decriminalization movement going and to educate our representatives so that those systems can modernize and become more effective, and allow those people that don't even know they don't have a voice to become much happier and healthier, or at least have the possibility of it.
How about you, Serena?
I actually came to this through stumbling upon the Intercollegiate Psychedelic Network. And I'm not a college student, so it was kind of a acceptance, and he said, have some fun. And so I started talking to a lot of people, realizing that there's this movement happening. I've been using psychedelics since I was 13 years old, and have had quite an experience throughout my life that kind of leads me to the same conclusion, being able to re-imprint negative experiences that you carry with you throughout your day. So I feel that it's powerful to be able to kind of, let go of those and move forward towards that identity that you would like to identify with and who you would like to become. And so it fosters growth, and seeing the scientific research that is happening, though there's much that isn't happening, that should be happening, that we're also working on. I found that SSDP, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, they have some very effective groups as well. And so I've kind of been working between groups and trying to bring the scientific research to these reps in an understandable manner, because, I could sit and ramble technically about DMT for a very long time, but that's not going to help others understand this that don't have that kind of research background. And so it's making the research that's needed available in a manner that everybody can understand. And that's kind of where I found my role.
And I was going to say,
Yeah, I was just going to say, Serena, you bring up some good points. I want to get to James, who he just joined us. But you brought up finding student groups when you're not a student. I found SSDP long before I was a student. Then I decided I wanted to go back to school. And how do I make an SSDP here? And that's how I met Colin, was at my first SSDP conference. Also, when we're talking about tools that we're using to make one click for our lazier audiences, one-click actions easier. I agree, this action hour, getting people actually involved, getting them to talk to each other, getting them fired up. So when they write a personal letter, it is from the heart and it does grab that attention. But there is that large culture that is just the one click. If it's available, they're going to do it. And that also has its separate application. I found partnering with SSDP and groups like that is also very helpful with those tools, because those tools can be expensive, but they already have them at their, ready to use. You just need to reach out and be like, hey, we're doing this thing that aligns with your principles. Let's work together. Also, hey, we're in a college town. Do you have a chapter here? Or like, how do we get this going?
Well, it gives you a large number of people that have drive and have an outlook towards their future, because they're going to be leaving college and looking towards some kind of workforce and like, what kind of world do we want to live in? There's also a huge amount of people that might not be online, and like indigenous tribes that have been using this medicine for a very long time. I think it's important to start connecting their voice to this as well, because it's something that affects them regardless. I mean, like whatever happens in the government, like if they don't have a voice, or we aren't including them, because I mean they're not as wired in as, say, a college town where there's all these students that have these laptops and like are cranking out this homework. I mean, it's a totally different way of living. And so there's so many different groups and like people that are at a disadvantage that it's important to reach out to and say like, hey, like we are creating this collective voice, like let's make sure it includes everybody.
James, welcome to the Entheo Show. We just asked Brendan and Serena like how they got called to like working on this type of movement, and how did you become involved, or like what led you to becoming a part of it?
Thanks for having me, Colin. Really excited to be here. For me, like many, the war on drugs is extremely personal. When I was quite young, around 5 years old, a meth lab exploded just a few houses down from mine in the trailer park where I grew up. And ever since then, the war on drugs has been ever present. One of my closest cousins, Jason, suffers from opiate addiction and did so because he found meds in his uncle's medicine cabinet. Since then, he's lost custody of his daughters. He's been in a cycle of, houselessness, incarceration, and rehabilitation that just doesn't help. And for people that are caught in that death spiral, their parents are waiting every night to hear that their son has died and that it was fentanyl this time. We have a mental health care system that has failed me, that has failed my entire generation. And seeing that, it's hard not to be extremely passionate about something like psychedelics and making them equitable for everyone to access. My experiences with psychedelics have helped me realize this passion, have helped me become more compassionate and open with other people, accept love from other people. And it defies words how much our society needs this and how it could transform the mental health landscape of our country and pretty soon the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, because we've happened to find some incredible people like Serena, like Brennan, and like many others on our team that are willing to share their stories with lawmakers and are not going to sit back to wait for a company like Compass Pathways to patent this, that are not going to sit back for 10 years of phase 3 trials for something like DMT. We're going to make it happen, and we're going to make it happen now because it's needed.
Cool.
That was very well put.
That's very
Thank you.
powerful. And one thing that I noticed in the Somerville resolution is at the end, you kind of put, it's kind of in there, it says something about like how the war on drugs is a mental health crisis. Can one of you speak to like how that got into the resolution?
So you'll have to pardon me because I've been reading legalese all day. So I don't remember that particular statement in the resolution. But the war on drugs from its offset was racist, even prior to Nixon's top domestic policy aide saying that it was going to be used to criminalize anti-war protesters and Black people. Even before that, we saw that smoking heroin was banned in California, Vancouver, and the West Coast to criminalize Chinese Americans, to make them the other and the outlet of our hatred through these drug policies. And so that theme runs throughout all of our activism, is this theme of racial justice. Mental health care is also an issue of racial justice. A lot of, I think it's less than 5% of therapists and mental health care providers are Black or people of color. Insurance rates disproportionately harm people of color. And our medical system has excluded them throughout history. So we take a very proactive approach to calling out these issues in our resolutions, because a big problem that happened with cannabis legalization in Massachusetts was it was written primarily by people who were not just like white, there's nothing wrong with being white per se, but like we're really only looking at the issue through the prism of their whiteness. It wasn't passed as a referendum with equity initiatives. We weren't raising awareness of how we need a total transformation in the way that we treat other human beings in this country. So anytime that we can mention that this is an initiative for both mental health care, but also for justice more generally, we're going to take that opportunity because it's unbelievably important. And to erase that history is to do an injustice to this movement.
Right on.
I strongly agree with that. And there's also the studies that have been done have largely been done on a white population. The studies that have been done have not included the BIPOC community largely. If you look at the subjects that they're doing these tests on. And so in terms of using these for trauma, I mean, trauma can be passed down generationally. There's an amazing book by Eric from Lost in Transmission, and it explains how like these traumatic events, you know, like we'll use slavery. So, you know, a person now may not have been a slave, but you know, their ancestors were, and this gets passed down, and they might not even realize what they're holding on to. You know, and psychedelics are like a tool, a mechanism to help work through these. That whereas like simple talk therapy doesn't exactly access your subconscious mind. So I think it's important, especially with the indigenous cultures as well. Like they've already been using this. This is part of their culture, and so this war on drugs makes a sliding scale against people that face that kind of adversity in their lives. And so it's important to give that a voice, because who else will?
Right.
So I know we have, I know DN National has received a bit of pushback too, but from people, you know, they want to pull the psychedelic exceptionalism card, and they want to say, you know, hey, this incrementalism's not going to work. I have my own reasons for why I'm doing this. But why is decrim nature the right thing for you now where you're at? And yeah, I think, Brendan, if you want to take it first again, and we'll go right down the line with it.
Yeah, so I think the incrementalism thing is a funny thing. I think that just stems when people say that they don't understand the full picture, and I didn't either myself. Even as recently as about a month ago, and the key is you got to decriminalize first, and here's why. If you go ahead and legalize with what will most likely be a medical route without decriminalizing, you still have the prosecution of BIPOC communities for everything that we just talked about, right? So you totally miss the idea. And decriminalization is the kind of the pin that needs to be taken out first for the rest of it to unravel. I think this is the evidence is clear, the path is clear, and it's not all pros, right? But it seems like the solution is not complete without decriminalization, and it is typically the most politically ready path forward. So for those both reasons, it makes sense to do so.
Do either of you have opinions on that?
Yeah. So I think Brennan makes incredible points as always. And I would just say lawmakers are all in very different places on drug policy. And any progress is usually pretty good progress unless you waste an opportunity to go a little further. And that's kind of what we've discovered in Massachusetts. We went into a lot of this advocacy assuming that lawmakers would be closed off. But actually, when they're talking to their constituents and they hear how psychedelic plants have hurt them or how the war on drugs more generally has harmed them, they're pretty open to like making a difference, especially on a city level. So meeting lawmakers where they're at, like if they're comfortable with a resolution that, you know, calls for state legalization or goes a little further and decriminalizes possession of all controlled substances, that's really been our approach in Mass. We haven't encountered a city council that was willing to decriminalize cultivation, transportation, grow, gather, give, and not also take that extra step to decriminalize possession of controlled substances. If we did encounter that situation, that would be a conversation to have with our community and be very transparent about it, because we really are in this in terms of base staters to end the entire war on drugs. But psychedelics are an incredible tool to help do that too, because of how they treat addiction. So, you know, if it means throwing out incremental progress and making no progress at all, it'd be silly to grandstand on any bigger issue. I think you also see this on the state level, what other states are doing in terms of their legislation being filed versus what we're doing. You know, in the state of Massachusetts, we're filing a state task force to study legalization because we want to do it right, and we want to grow a big tent across the state. We want those Western and Central Massachusetts lawmakers to put their name to this too and feel comfortable, and then assemble those experts and those advocates to write the gold standard bill. That's versus, you know, filing a bill that's a bit like grandstanding, that's a little like too past the Overton window yet. It sends a great message. It gets a lot of media clicks. It excites people. But we also want to be honest with our community where we're at and bring those people into the big tent so that next year we can make history and that we can use these state bills in the meantime to decriminalize almost 90% of the population of Massachusetts, which has really kind of emerged as a goal. And it's a goal we can achieve because we have volunteers that understand that incremental progress is still progress, that city by city progress is still progress. So I hope that makes sense.
I appreciate that. I know we had said we'd be done by top of the hour, so I don't know if any of you have to slide off.
I'll be jumping off. Thank you so much for having me. This has just been a pleasure. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As you guys move forward and as our show moves forward, we'd love to have you back after you guys make some more progress. Love to hear what's going on. If James and Serena, if you want to hop off, feel free. If you want to stick around for a while, also feel free. I'm about to move computers and locations, but we're going to talk about a book here in a minute that we've been reading, but I'd love to get some final thoughts from you if you want to stick around a few more minutes.
Sure, I was tardy to the party, so I may as well stay a little longer.
Great. Hey, could somebody answer the type of resistance you faced before, you know, things were passed in Somerville and in Cambridge, and what kind of resistance do you foresee, second part of the question, going forward with that whole statewide initiative?
It's a great question. I think the biggest opposition is actually within our own community and ourselves in action. And I don't just say that to be cliched, I really mean it. I think that if enough of us who actually believe in this work together, set aside drama, and come to agreed principles to advocate for, we can do it. And I mean that. In terms of opposition that we got, overwhelmingly, it is always a priorities argument. It's a lawmaker that doesn't know much about this. Maybe their cousin had a quote unquote bad trip or just didn't have a good time on psychedelics and they heard about that. And they say, look, your story is incredible. I'm not going to say no to your face, but then they'll kind of, you know, put it aside or say, we need to look at the evidence a little bit more. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and kind of just gaslight us a bit when they're really saying no. But a central tenet of our organizing has been the phrase, losing is winning. Even when those lawmakers say no to you, you are advancing the conversation and you are normalizing psychedelic medicine. And that is incredibly important because that person who wasn't willing to help you, had other priorities, you know, maybe has really culturally conservative constituents that they are worried about, they're still going to have that conversation at their dinner table that night. They know someone who is struggling with depression or addiction or headaches, and that information that you shared is going to trickle through slowly but surely. So don't get discouraged if someone, you know, either says no because they don't understand what you're saying or won't prioritize what you're asking them to do. Just take it as a learning opportunity and know that you're educating them. The second thing I'd say is frame things in terms of COVID and the current situation. It's incredibly important that your materials reference what's happening in your state in terms of overdoses, in terms of depression. It's also incredibly important to frame things in terms of the mental health crisis the pandemic has caused, or even this ice age is potentially going to contribute to. So make things contextual, and it will only increase the urgency that they feel to help you.
Right on.
Definitely.
Yeah,
important.
I like that losing is winning. We went into Ann Arbor the same way. We formed as a ballot initiative. We went in with the attitude, the second they tell us no, we're going to say, well, you missed your chance of going as a ballot initiative. You might as well do this now. And we were stunned to find that we didn't even need to. We never needed to put that on the table. But we went in with the attitude that even if we lost at one level, that was the attention, that was the progress, that was the group building, that was the organization building that was going to lead us to the eventual win. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah, and just to echo that, not all victories have to make national news. Not all victories have to be on the cover of a magazine to be meaningful. So if you're starting a group, small wins, keep the momentum going and get people excited. And that chorus of small victories is what leads to bigger ones. So don't get discouraged if one meeting with a lawmaker is a victory.
Absolutely. Our first meeting with city council potential champion went really well. But I think our first win was the first time we just had a social media share that reached like 100 shares. And we just shared something and it like spidered out and it funneled all these people to our network. And so we're like, okay, we need to have an event where our network just reached a critical mass. And so we held just an open event. Everybody could come, not just organizing, but let's figure out what everybody's strengths are. Let's hear their stories. And, taking those little wins is huge. And from there, we had a much larger group, a much more committed group. And I think then, our first local news story with somebody that was a friend of somebody that was with our movement wrote the story. But that all of a sudden blows up to state news, and it took off so rampantly. And it's very exciting to see Massachusetts doing the same thing. We usually go through a book every week. Past 2 episodes, we've been going through Good Chemistry by Julie Holland. We just started Tangled Life this past week by Sheldon Mandrake. I forgot my book downstairs, Jim, if you have yours.
Before we go to that, I do want to hear. Sabrina was going to mention something.
Sure.
That
Please.
resistance question.
It's an oddly interesting thing that I had recognized in. I had a TBI 3 years ago. I was hit in the head with a 600-pound furnace, and lost the ability to speak, and so I still have these migraines that were from the accident. So they had prescribed something called rizatriptan. And I looked into it, and rizatriptan is a tryptamine. And so I have been kind of baffled by that, because that's already something that's being prescribed that falls in the same class. DMT is at the core of rizatriptan. There's a long, chemical slew group that goes before it, but DMT is still on there. It's already being prescribed. And so it's finding little things like that to present and say like, hey, this is something that's already happening. And like logic kind of takes over. If logically this is helping that, and it's something that's already being done, then why not continue snowballing in that same direction? Things do build, and when you have the evidence base that keeps on building, and you have people that keep coming forward with their stories, it's a powerful momentum. And the decriminalization process starts because there's a lot of infrastructure changes that are going to need to happen to incorporate this into the medical profession. We have doctors that, I mean, I can't imagine sitting there tripping with my therapist for 6 hours. It's just, I can't. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I also advocate for DMT so strongly, especially in a microdose setting, because it's about 20 minutes and it's done. And then you can discuss in therapy afterwards for your normal hour session. It doesn't turn into this huge event. But I think it's fascinating how incrementally it's been happening already without people even really recognizing that. That's a it's in the tryptin class, the tryptamines, which mushrooms, DMT, LSD, any of the serotoninogenic substances fall into that class.
So I believe, I'm not sure if it was the substance you named, but it's a headache medication is the main way people find the precursor ergotamine tartrate for LSD manufacture is they divert that from the medical supply from the headache medicine.
Yep. Ergotamine is actually pretty hard. It's a fungus on, I think it's some kind of wheat plant, and so you'd have to find that otherwise. But the ergo-based medications came before the triptans. The triptans are relatively new. However, by relatively new, I mean they've been around for at least 15 years, 20 years. And so this kind of medicine has kind of been going on behind the curtain for a while now. And now that we're talking about decriminalizing these substances, it brings in that question with how this is going to transition into the actual infrastructure we have to apply and help the population. So that's why the decriminalization kind of seems like the first step, so that way we can all sit and conference about this and try and figure out the best ways to incorporate it that will help the greatest amount of people.
Absolutely. You had said something else. I'm spacing on it now. I just came to my head as you're talking.
I have
Serena's thought gave me a thought, if you all don't mind me sharing. I'll also have to step off in a bit.
Go for it.
Go ahead.
One big lesson is that drugs are already legal. They're just legal for certain people. Methamphetamine is legal. Adderall isn't. It's abused on college campuses all over. Opioids are legal for McKinsey to scheme and push on people and kill people with, but heroin is illegal. And then great example Serena gave. Apparently this substance is already legal in some medications, but other versions of it are made illegal to criminalize certain folks, or just a result of history. So I just want to say I'm thankful to have joined you all on the podcast. We learned so much from the work you all did in Ann Arbor. You inspire us, and we love you. We love you all, and we want to do everything we can to help support any chapter in the United States. We have a lot of chapters already have resources. So if reach out to one that's a little more established, and they probably already have the documents, the Google links, the methods that have worked for them. Just be in touch and get that knowledge. You don't have to rewrite the activist handbook. You can learn from other folks. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, James.
Catch you later.
I'm actually curious, what book is it that you guys are reading? I just I picked up tryptamines I've known and loved, and then the phenylethylamines that I've known and loved, both by Shogun.
Those are two of my favorite books. Their love story, Sasha and Anne, is just, oh my God, they're incredible beings.
They put in so much footwork on that. It's something that, considering that time, the information that they have there it's like a psychedelic Bible. I mean, they even have their own trip reports in there, so people kind of know what to expect. It's like a harm reduction gold mine. Because
it's a harm reduction gold mine. It's a database of some entheogens that are highly untapped that have incredible potential.
Yeah.
Among which I find 2CD to be a favorite. But I think it also pulls back, something, another piece of why this decrim nature is an important step in this movement is we're protecting community-based ceremony for these substances. Like you said, I can't imagine having a 6 to 12 hour psychedelic experience in even the most relaxed therapy setting. Like, you can turn on some mood lightings or even give me the remote to the music, and it's still going to feel very clinical.
That's the beauty of DMT also, is that it kind of takes you and dissociates you from your surrounding for the time being, and it's a shorter experience. But I mean, since there's so little funding, have you guys seen the DMT Quest documentary?
I have not.
Okay, so you
I've
guys
seen, I
have to
think, the
see
spirit molecule.
No, it's DMT Quest, and so if you look it up on Instagram, the link to their video, it's so well done. I was so happy to see something like this put together, because not only is it well researched and well informed and well put together, it also
You know what? I think that
Nick did that.
Nick was part of it. We had a guest on last week, and
right on. That highlighted the need for funding for DMT, because there's all these studies being done for psilocybin and all these, but what's at the core of psilocybin? DMT. It's 4-HO DMT. So I mean, there's so little funding for that, and that really surprises me, because I think personally, therapeutically, it would be the most beneficial.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. And I think that's something we've been trying to protect with the DN movement is extracts of these naturally occurring substances because of DMT. And it becomes very tricky to talk about protecting the sacred when the inclusion of LSD and MDMA or ketamine enters the conversation. But we're entering a new paradigm, and I think the one thing that needs to remain in everybody's hearts, no matter which side of that you stand on, we're all working towards the same thing. I don't know anybody in the decrim nature movement that doesn't support decrim all drugs, but this is realistic and where we're at, and we're protecting important pieces of the experience that's already established.
Of history. I mean, this is the use of these entheogens has been around probably longer than the United States has. I mean, these are practices that have been historically included in many cultures all over the world, not just the indigenous here. And it's been taken away and criminalized, which this movement that's happening, it's not just a movement to decriminalize drugs, it's a movement to expand consciousness itself. And so, like with electronics, it had this exponential growth. All of a sudden we had these big phones, clunky things, and now look at where we are. It was like an exponential explosion. And so, like, the rediscovery of our human consciousness that connects us to all the other humans, the power of our own mind is about to unlock and unfold, and I have a feeling it's going to happen at exponential like proportions.
I love it.
Right on. I like how you said that. I talked with you the other day, and I remember you saying that, and it just stuck with me in my mind too. Like,
once you think it, you can't unthink it.
Yeah.
I want to throw out a website called openstates.org. Openstates.org is where you can go to find your representative. You just type in your address. It'll tell you who your rep or your senator is in your own state, in the entire country. So openstates.org.
I've been talking to a few IPN members, and we're looking at kind of trying to say, like, hey, like, all these individual groups, like, we should kind of convene at some point, because we're all working towards the same purpose, but separately. And so, I mean, it's important to have that local aspect so people can connect on that level, that community level. But I mean, as an entire nation, it's also important to be making statements as a collective, because we're all going after the same things. It's not like one group is trying to do something drastically different than another group. And so we've been looking into, like, starting to coordinate something like that.
Yeah, we're all for that.
Yeah.
It would be nice for people that are trying to start their own like activist group to have somewhere where they can go that like James had said, go somewhere, go talk to people that already have all these documents and stuff. That way you don't have to start from scratch. There's no reason to start from scratch when we already have these effective things written up. I mean, the most that they probably have to do is look at the local data for their overdose rates, their depression rates, their suicide, and be able to include that. But I mean, a few simple searches pulls up this information very quickly. Information is readily available if you take the time to look. And so I think having that kind of like decentralized gathering point, if that makes any sense, like like a kind of a nexus for everybody to kind of look and say, like, if I'd like to be a part of this, this is a starting point, and they can take it wherever they want. But just kind of having a home base where we can all tag team and say, like, hey, this is what we're doing. Hey, we tried this, it worked great. Or like, we've been getting a great response with this study here. Because taking studies and breaking them down for people to understand that would otherwise not be able to get through the document is utterly fascinating. I mean,
That's decriminature. Decriminature, the national, is that centralized space, I think, where we all can kind of go back and find information and have a soundboard, if you will, for things that we're trying or that have been successful or non-successful.
So have you guys been looking into the research bans that they have and with the scheduled controlled substances, and like how you can't research this, or have you guys been looking into that at all?
Oh, we could.
Go ahead, Colin.
I was gonna say we kind of like have just like working for me, just like working with the cannabis in the cannabis space. I know like every year we get like Sue Sisley from Arizona to come in, and she has a FDA like like she's allowed to study cannabis.
Yeah.
But not as much. I know that like MDMA is like now in a it's past another trial, so it'd probably be like 2 years out or something before it actually makes like the drugs like.
I believe MDMA, psilocybin, and esketamine are all granted psilocybin FDA breakthrough therapies, so they're being pushed through some of the trials a little faster.
Yeah.
The dangerous part that we are wading into here with that is that in order for people to study these substances, they have to be procuring them from certain places. That's kind of where that compass pathways things come in, where like rescheduling substances versus just like legalizing it and making it easy for anybody to get. And so there's an SSDP group that I had just become a part of that started talking about this, which is why it came to mind. Because I mean, there's the research aspect. So by decriminalizing all these drugs without first having done, extensive research, is why the decriminalize part of it is a focus, because this research needs to happen.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it looks like almost winding down though to the end of our show here. We got about 10 minutes left.
I do have one question. I guess the book.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Serena. You please.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my one question is, I have a 2-year-old, and I think of my brother who's graduating high school and hearing, okay, drugs decriminalized, woohoo. The drug education programs that are in place right now are mainly of the just say no variety, and they haven't been working so well. So by changing our language with these children and saying these are decriminalized, but just don't do it. I mean, like, I'm wondering how to start, a group that might advocate for adding harm reduction principles to the drug education programs in high schools, because these kids are going to be entering a world where drugs are more easy to access, and they're not going to know how to safely operate in those circumstances.
So
One quick, I've got one.
SSDP National's been working on a public school-based curriculum for quite some time. It's called Just Say No, KNOW.
Okay.
It's, I believe, currently like 16 different packets. Overall view on the history of the drug war and everything, and then covers addiction, covers specific substances, covers harm reduction, covers testing your substances. It's pretty extensive and it's growing all the time. I know they've been working very hard on training, their legions to become Just Say No mentors. But I do believe the ultimate plan with that program is to get it implemented as a high school curriculum.
Okay.
And there was talk of some test high schools. I want to say Chicago, but it's been a long time. I was a board
I'd
member.
want to
of
say that like the
SSDP,
best high
but-
schools to test where would be where this legislation's already been passed. Since the
Yeah.
legislation has been passed in those cities, maybe approaching some school committee members and saying, like, hey, would you like to look at and readdress? Because students are at that age shamed for their drug use and penalized rather than trying to seek help and find those avenues. And so there's this big level of, like shaming these kids into hiding it, and it just perpetuates that cycle. And so it's not normalizing the drug use, but normalizing speaking up about it. What are you trying to run from? In Massachusetts,
that's something like
we have the healthcare.
SSDP at U of M should be looking at, or SSDP at Harvard or anywhere like that, Cambridge.
If I may, we had a meeting with our county commissioner, and he got to speak on the health department. And it took about 10 years for the health department here in our county to get some education for people about cannabis. 10 years after we passed laws for cannabis use. And that took a long time, but now that that's finally shown itself, I really believe that with entheogens being decriminalized here now in the county, that we need to pair up that education with cannabis, because that's an entheogen, with all the other entheogens, and start with the health departments in our local areas.
I would really love to be a part of that. I know personally, I know someone on the school committee locally, and so I've kind of been trying to just draft up some ideas of conversation of how to approach kids. Because I mean, when you approach that age group specifically, like, I mean, everything to them sounds so cheesy, but I mean, it's about really getting real. And there's so many different ways to approach that. So I mean, I just kind of wanted to broach it briefly because it's something that I'm going to be continuing to advocate for, because I mean, like, we're doing all these things and talking about harm reduction amongst college students, but when those college students get to college, if they already had that kind of background, you might be able to further expound upon those ideas of, like the benefits of using a medical system that's actually for the people.
Right on. Do you guys want to get to that end of the book?
Yeah,
Before we get
what's it called?
Real quickly,
Yeah.
we won't talk too much because I know we got like 5 minutes here. Oh, you got it there, Mike. Nice. Is
I
mine
went
back?
downstairs.
Nice. I'm like almost through the second chapter, I think. What I like about it is it's more about mushrooms and what they are, what they've been on this earth. That's where I'm at right now. It's not really getting into the whole psychedelic side of it, but just mushrooms in general and how they support life on this planet.
I agree. I think the deepest they've really dug into psychedelics is the LSD study they participated in. As a scientific researcher, to see the effectiveness of, I guess it was trying to complete their research while under the influence of microdoses of LSD. And so they participated in that. They used that in the intro as, a little bit of history. I did find that interesting. lots of talk about truffles, which are a fascination of mine. And, I've been, one of my goals is to become a truffle farmer and plant some groves of oak saplings inoculated with truffles, and kind of put that as my retirement plan out there. So I'm into that. Talks a lot about the chemical languages that fungi use to communicate with themselves, with plants, to connect with each other, and how their body is very unique in terms of the fact that it doesn't actually have a form. Like, if the food changes, if the need for supply changes, or where it's got to route something, it just changes. It moves its cells and regrows and strengthens a new network. Very similarly to, how we form thoughts. We start building a connection, then we stray off and get distracted with something else for a while, and that starts building, and the other one starts fading. Maybe come back, rebuild. It's always kind of a little give and take, but eventually these really meaningful connections are built. And talking about the intelligence of fungi and building those connections, and slime mold recreating different city transportation networks, and to such a degree of success that they're now using them to plan city transportation networks, which is also very interesting. So it's a really great book. I look forward to getting deeper into it. I'm not much further than you, Jim, it doesn't sound like, but we'll be back with it next week, and hopefully have a little more.
Yeah, and next week we should have someone from Decriminalized Nature, Washington, D.C. on our show, or 2 weeks from now, not 1 week from now.
That'll be exciting. We talked about all the different things going on around the country, and they're all very different, the approaches that are being taken. And I think Massachusetts and ourselves, we've been a little more similar, but DC with their ballot initiative, Iowa with their right to try for end of life, everybody's taking a different approach. And I believe in the protecting nature, protecting community ceremony, protecting home grow, and that kind of access, teaching people to grow, and gifting materials. I'm a big fan of that model, and I hope to protect that because it's a very special thing.
And then I just want to remind everyone, tomorrow Michigan Psychedelic Society is having a Thank You Plant Medicine event. It starts at 6:30 and it's on Zoom. So be sure to get on that. And then is it March 3rd is the Decriminalized Nature Michigan community meeting?
I do believe that's so.
I think it's a Wednesday.
If you are anywhere in the state of Michigan, you want to be part of a group, you already are part of a group, you want to start a new group, you want to know what's going on with the groups in the state, and some exciting new news from our state group, check out that meeting. Thank You Plant Medicine is a little bit more community-based. We're going to be sharing, we're going to get to know each other. Most of these things are very important to our movement, so we hope you join us again tomorrow night, 6:30, and March 3rd.
6:30, I think. Yeah.
6:30.
I think it's 6:30.
Thank you so much, Serena, for coming in.
We hope to,
Yeah.
definitely come back and see us sometime.
Time.
Well, we wish you guys all the best moving forward, and I hope IPSI takes the same cue you guys did with neighbor cities and follows Ann Arbor real quick.
Oh, see.
I see only good things in the future. Living the dream.
Absolutely. Peace, everybody.
Bye.